In tonight's Tax Insider, Hurricane Katrina, 10 years later. This week marks a decade since that Category 3 storm came ashore on the U.S. Gulf Coast. Katrina displaced thousands of families from Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama and killed more than 1,800 people. In its aftermath, billions of dollars were approved for disaster relief, but there are a number of reports suggesting that money was not well spent. For insight, we turn to our guest on Capital Insider tonight, David Williams. Is the president of the Taxpayer Protection Alliance. David, good to have you here.
Thank you.
Days after Congress appropriated more than $10 billion in rescue and relief aid, and then an additional almost $52 billion came a few days later. That money, a tremendous amount of it, and it was immediately done. Congress moved about as fast as it has. And I can't even imagine how long it would take to do something like that. Everything worked as it was supposed to on this end. What about on the other end? Was that money well spent?
Well, first and foremost, the federal government has a role in helping people after a natural disaster. So what Congress did, they did the right thing at the beginning, was they spent the money. They made sure the resources went to the Gulf Coast. What Congress didn't do was to do the oversight to make sure the money was spent wisely. I mean, there's stories of $12.5 million wasted on ice. They sent the ice down to the region. They couldn't use it, so they sent it back north. They stored it in a warehouse for a year, and they said, wait a second, we can't use this ice because it's probably contaminated now, so $12.5 million to melt a bunch of ice. But that's $12.5 million. We're talking about upwards of $6 to $10 billion wasted in a number of ways, and we've seen the reports throughout the years of just the amount of waste.
Who gets the blame for that? FEMA was the agency that was most out in front. There were stories about temporary trailers that had huge problems with all kinds of contamination and formaldehyde in some of them, if memory serves. Who's the bad guy here, I guess?
There are a lot of bad guys here. First and foremost, Congress, when they spend money, they need to do oversight of that money.
It's not enough just to write the check. You have to also send somebody down to see how it's spent.
But FEMA has a responsibility. They're the ones that are getting the money to spend it wisely, to put the safeguards in place. So there are a lot of bad actors in this. And the frustrating part is that people want to help the other people that are suffering from this natural disaster, but there was no follow-through. Senator Tom Coburn at the time, he wanted to spend an extra $6 million for the Inspector General. And Congress said, no, that's too much. Well, imagine $6 million to audits out of $60 billion. That's a drop in the bucket to make sure that they're doing what they say they're doing and how they're spending the money.
The FEMA's director, right in the middle of this thing, resigned, and a report last September said the agency's main system for providing relief was, and I love this, not effective during disasters like this.
Understatement.
That may be the understatement of a government agency I've read in quite some time.
It is, and last September there was also an IG report that said that they've tried this new software system to better coordinate FEMA's efforts, but also different agencies within the government. They've spent about $230 million on the software system. It doesn't work. It wasn't operational in 2014. They don't know when it's going to be operational. It may take an additional $200 million to get this software system operational.
Subsequent to Katrina, we had Superstorm Sandy along the East Coast. Billions of dollars was appropriated there as well. You're going to have natural disasters. We've got fires out west right now. We passed a relatively quiet tornado season. That won't last. There's going to be this funding. And FEMA is having a difficult time with a software system to even get it up and running. How much confidence can American taxpayers have in how that money is going to be spent in the future?
Well, that's what's frustrating, is we know there's going to be a natural disaster. Federal government knows this, Congress knows this, and they know it's going to happen relatively quickly. We have hurricane seasons, we have massive snowstorms, tornadoes, you've mentioned them all. So what we need to do is to really have a better handle on this, and Congress needs to take the leadership in this and make sure that FEMA is spending the money correctly. But let's look at this software system. This was supposed to be an off-the-shelf concept software system, so this wasn't supposed to be reinventing the wheel.
Yeah, plug and play.
Absolutely. We've heard that how many times where the government tries to create a new software system that just fails. So there's something inherently wrong with how the government is doing IT, information technology. So there are a lot of issues to address.
We're approaching the end of August, and that means that Congress is going to be coming back to town, and the federal budget is liable to be top of mind for an awful lot of them. And the worry is that maybe there's a shutdown coming, and the issue of Planned Parenthood might be a problem. This is something the Republican leadership does not want to touch, but are they going to have to confront this issue?
They are going to have to confront this issue. And a budget showdown, it happens every year. Congress, again, has failed to do their job to pass spending bills. But here's the problem, is that this happens every year. We should know better, and Congress should know better that when they come back in September, they have not only the budget to deal with, the spending bills, but they also have a transportation bill that expires at the end of October. So there's a lot of work to do, and there's that little thing called the Iran nuke deal that they also have to talk about.
You've mentioned a couple of things there that are on their plate. Are there other things that we need to be watching for when they come back to town?
I think a real sleeper issue is internet taxes, because the internet access tax moratorium is set to expire on September 30th. So that could be a sleeper issue that no one's talking about that they need to address. And also the Export-Import Bank, because that might be thrown in any sort of budget deal. We got rid of it on June 30th, but there's a lot of little things that could be thrown in.
Both of those issues are headaches for the Republican leadership, it sounds like to me. David Williams is the president of the Taxpayer Protection Alliance. David, many thanks.
Thank you.